Alright, today in this video we're going to go over what anti-inflammatory herbs are and kind of what they're doing in our bodies and how they're interacting with our systems. So before we talk about what an anti-inflammatory herb is and what it does, I kind of wanted to go over what inflammation is. So inflammation is our body's first response to either an injury or an infection. It actually is part of our immune response. We have two different types of inflammation. We have the acute inflammation and we also have chronic inflammation. So acute inflammation is more of like you sprained your ankle or you got like a scratch on your arm or something like that, and you'll notice that that area becomes really inflamed. It might turn red, it might feel warm to the touch, there might be a lot of swelling or pain. That is your acute inflammation response, and it's allowing more blood flow into that area so that the immune system can send more white blood cells to be able to fight whatever pathogens or infection or do any cellular repair, things like that. So that inflammation is needed and it is good because the body never does anything without a reason. So the inflammation is part of your immune response and the body does it on purpose. So I want that to be something that you guys can, like, if you didn't think of it that way, that's kind of like a little brain shift to understand that inflammation can actually be good. And that acute inflammation can last anywhere from like a few hours to a few days. It doesn't really hang around, but it does. It hangs around long enough that it can get the job done and get that immune response to that affected area. What happens is sometimes that acute inflammation can shift into chronic inflammation, and that's where that inflammation is just hanging around a lot longer than it should. And usually this is caused by the body not being able to get rid of whatever pathogens, usually like a virus or something, or the body gets stuck in that threat mode and it thinks that there's still something to fight, but the threat's already gone, and so it just kind of gets stuck in that threat mode and it can't calm down, and so that inflammation just kind of hangs around a lot longer than it should. So those are two different types of inflammation that I wanted to go over before we jump into our herbs, because I wanted you to kind of understand how these herbs address that inflammation, because we don't always want to jump to anti-inflammatory herbs too early, because sometimes, like I said, the inflammation is good to have around. We want to encourage it to do its job and not intervene too soon, but we also don't want to let it kind of carry over into that chronic inflammation. Alright, so now for the fun part, let's go over a few herbs that might help address the inflammation. So the first one, all of these honestly are pretty easy to come across. They might already be in your kitchen, so pretty excited to go over these. Cardamom is going to be the first one. Most people don't think of this herb when they think of anti-inflammatories, and a lot of people cook with it all the time and don't even realize that it has anti-inflammatory benefits. The way that this herb works for inflammation has two different active compounds, and they are strong cytokine inhibitors. You have your alpha terpinyl acetate, and then you also have the 1,8-cineol. One of the things that falls underneath these compounds would be your CRPs, and this is something that your doctor might test for if they think that something is going on in your body, especially if you have a lot of inflammation going on without really a reason. These CRPs, they act like your body's like alarm system. It's the louder the alarm or the higher your CRPs, the bigger the threat that your body has detected. And so these CRPs, I mean, they could go from hardly even noticeable in a test to 1,000 times more with chronic inflammation. So when you have these levels checked by your doctor, they're trying to see if your body is stuck with the alarm system going off, basically, to see if your body thinks that there is something going on, there's a bigger threat going on in your body. It's cardamom, since it naturally helps bring those levels down of your CRPs through inhibiting these other compounds. It's basically essentially helping turn that alarm bell down, and it's letting your body know that it can come out of that inflammatory response and start to wind down and settle. So that's something that cardamom does. Now that you know, and you might have that in your kitchen, I mean, you can start adding it into just like your everyday meals, just to kind of help your body be able to regulate that response, that inflammatory response. So I thought that was pretty cool. The next one I want to go over is chamomile. And this one has 2 different active compounds that help inhibit inflammatory signaling. The pigeonin will suppress the production of the anti-inflammatory mediators, like your nitric acid and your prostaglandins, and we'll go over prostaglandins in the next one as well. But it will suppress the production of those. The next one would be your terpenoids, and this suppresses the nuclear factor kappa B signaling. And that's basically a protein that controls the transcription of your DNA, cytokine production, and your cell survival. So it basically regulates how the immune system responds to the infection. So you have your chamomile that really overall helps run your immune response a little bit more smoothly. And the last one I want to go over, and this one is 100% different than the last 2 herbs. We have ginger, and this inhibits 2 very specific enzymes. You have your cyclooxygenase, sometimes known as the COX enzyme. And this enzyme is responsible for producing prostaglandins. So similar to chamomile, it actually will reduce the overall production of those prostaglandins. And prostaglandins, if you don't know already, most people know them for the symptoms that you have during your menstrual cycle. A lot of the times it'll be during your luteal phase and into your menstrual phase, where your cramps might be much more stronger, or you might have a lot of bloating or diarrhea or just inflammation in general. That's the prostaglandins, that if they are out of balance, then you're going to be experiencing these symptoms much stronger, and it'll be much more uncomfortable. So the ginger actually inhibits the cyclooxygenase that produces the prostaglandins. So you're kind of cutting it off at like the production level to make sure that those prostaglandins stay balanced, which I thought was really cool. And this is actually the same mechanism that your NSAIDs or your pain medications, like your ibuprofen, that's the same mechanism that they target. So they target the COX enzymes. The difference between ginger and, let's say, your ibuprofen would be that ginger doesn't only inhibit the cyclooxygenase enzyme, it also inhibits something called the lipoxygenase enzyme, or your LOX enzyme. And this enzyme, it produces leukotrienes. I hope I pronounced that right. Some of these words can be like a little bit tongue-tied. But that is basically focuses on inflammation in your respiratory system. So the COX enzyme is more towards like the prostaglandin. Wow. So the COX enzyme is more focused in inflammation through that prostaglandins, through like the reproductive system is where you're going to see most of that inflammation. And then the LOX enzyme is going to be more towards like respiratory inflammation. All right, but that's like 3 different herbs that address inflammation in 3 completely different ways, which is really interesting once you start going into the research and the getting down into that like mechanism, physiology level, it gets really exciting to see how these different herbs are responding to our bodies and interacting with our bodies and helping support the systems. So you could have something like your ginger that goes right to the production line, and it's like, okay, we got to get this like regulated. And so that's where you're going to be reaching for ginger, is when you want to just start regulating the response, the inflammatory response and signaling and the production of those different compounds that cause inflammation. Whereas your chamomile and your cardamom, they're going to be a little bit more, they're inhibitors of what's being produced and making it so that they can control what's already been produced in the body versus the production of those compounds. So it's pretty cool to see and understand which types of herbs that you would reach for in different situations. And again, inflammation isn't bad. Inflammation is actually really good for your body, and we need inflammation. So even though you understand that these herbs have anti-inflammatory properties, we want to be careful about when we are reaching for these herbs, because if you have, let's say, a sprained ankle, you want to give that ankle probably at least 24 to 48 hours to do its job with the inflammation. You want to give it time to actually get that immune response going so that you can heal quicker. If you're reaching for those anti-inflammatory herbs right away, as soon as you see any inflammation whatsoever, then you're working against what your body is already trying to do. So I hope that this kind of helps you understand a little bit more what inflammation is, the different ways that herbs might address the inflammation, and also when is a good time to start reaching for those anti-inflammatory herbs. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I am going to be doing a lot more videos on the different actions of these herbs, and also I want to start making more videos about the herbs themselves. So we went over the anti-inflammatory properties of 3 different herbs today, but I would like to go over the other benefits of these herbs as well, and those will be whole different series, but that's kind of how I want to build this channel. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something. If you would like to follow along and get more like of these basically bite-sized lessons is kind of what I'm aiming for, then make sure to follow along, and I hope that I see you in the next video.